which gets us to something slightly more controversial and something I know that Ronan has opinions about. Oh, here we go. Is that Van der Poel, you could absolutely make the argument, and in fact, Ronan, I believe you're about to, you could make the argument that Mathieu Van der Poel should have been disqualified under sort of, well, what normally happens in these bike races, because he used we call it the sidewalk. What do you guys call it?
Pavement.
Weird. He used the pavement.
The only person calls it a footpath.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Footpaths are like small and in the woods.
Yes.
Well, also Van der Poel wasn't walking, so it's the pavement.
So anyway, Van der Poel uses the part of the road that is not the road, is for the people. And there's people on it, there's fans on it, and he accelerated up and over, a nice little bit of bike handling. But we have seen riders disqualified for less. To be honest. Yeah, for significantly less. Ronan, give me your opinion on this.
My opinion is slightly more focused on the UCI's continued sort of haphazard approach to applying its own rules that it gets to write, and seemingly it also gets to decide when and when they're not applied. And yeah, this sort of struck me while watching the race on Sunday. Van der Poel hopped on the footpath. We've seen plenty of riders qualified for similar in the past. The commentary team actually said he might get disqualified for this, and then nothing happened. And I think we can all make assumptions as to why nothing happened. The defending champion who hopped on the footpath in the closing stages of the UCI's flagship event. But rather than making those assumptions, I went and looked up actually what is the penalty for doing this as per the UCI's own regulations. And the penalty is actually a yellow card, which is a new addition, between a 250 and a 1,000 Swiss franc fine and a 25-point UCI point deduction, which would have been very, very easy to apply to Van der Poel.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They let him off scot-free, despite going like a step further with any other riders I've seen doing that in the past and disqualifying them immediately from the races. Like Marlon Reusser earlier this year got disqualified from Ghent-Wevelgem with 3. She like mounted a psychopath with 5 kilometers to go. By the time the bunch had 3 kilometers to go, she'd already been ejected from the race. Luke Rowe was disqualified from Tour of Flanders for being forced, outside of his control onto a footpath. And 2 riders were disqualified from the 2017 Tour of Britain for mounting a footpath in a similar way to Van der Poel did when there was no spectators around. Yet Van der Poel on live TV mounts the path. And if you watch it in slow motion, exactly where he mounts the path, there's like a spectator looking the other direction who like swivels and turns around at the exact moment Van der Poel comes onto the path. And all it takes is for him to like step at the same time. And there's a collision there. And the regulation says that if an advantage is gained or if spectators are endangered, a rider may be disqualified in addition to the mandatory fine of what I listed earlier there. And so the question is twofold. Is first of all, why was no punishment served to Van der Poel for a clear infringement on the regulations, regardless of whether we agree with that regulation or not? And secondly, why were the other riders in the past disqualified? Or even there's actually a third question, that is the next person who gets disqualified, do they have like a right of appeal because Van der Poel hasn't been disqualified this time? The answer to all of those is no.
So is it just that the commissaires don't want all of angry Netherlands sliding into their DMs in the next 4 days? Like, are they? That's
to be fair. To be fair, there's always a potential for human error there. Even in soccer ball, that thing that you guys all watch.
Can't believe you just said soccer.
It's got an international audience, Johnny.
More than 50% American, actually.
They've got VAR, video assistant referee, and they still can't get it right. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. It was simple human error. I don't actually believe that was the case, and there is also the fact that these commissaires are volunteers. And if you make a big decision to disqualify someone like Van der Poel from a huge race like that, you're probably going to have a bit of crap to take for a while to come. Yeah. And who knows? Like, maybe that influenced the decision-making process there. It shouldn't. And that's probably an argument why commissaires should be paid full-time referees, effectively. But yeah, there's a lot that should happen in cycling that doesn't happen.
I mean, on the disqualification front, it does sound like, I mean, yellow cards, they were only introduced this summer. I think the Tour de France Femme was their first introduction. So it sounds like that has been one of the rules has been rewritten, or at least one of the, the implications have been rewritten. But, that does not let them off not doing anything.
Because I like to keep a copy of every time the regulations get updated, I go back and check what the regulations did say, and that is the only change to the regulations was that would also be awarded. The
I'm
fine,
just imagining
the points penalty was already in
I'm
place.
imagining folders on Ronan's
Yeah.
desktop with like, here are the rules on October 1st, 2024.
He pulls a drawer out and has to blow the dust off the top of them.
It doesn't get time for dust together.
Of course, my mistake.
I don't think it's too much.
It would,
The ridiculous rules are applied evenly to all riders.
it would have, it just would have been a great opportunity for a yellow card. Like I don't want to see like someone on the podium disqualified for like 4 seconds of bike riding on a footpath. Yes, he did endanger a fan, which is kind of the whole point of this rule, right? But still, you don't want to see that. But a nice yellow card, and in particular, we've talked about this before. I want Commissaire on a motorcycle to roll up next to him and just like wave it in his face,
Yeah, definitely.
ball style.
Pinstripes, yeah.
It would have added so much to the bike race. Like it would have just we're all sitting around waiting for Tadej Pogacar to win at that point, and it would have really improved the spectacle. I think.
Kelly, I'm sure you remember. Didn't this rule? It was introduced in like 2013, and didn't it stem from an incident in the 2011 or 2012 Tour of Flanders where actually a spectator passed away from injuries sustained when hit by a rider? And I don't remember the exact details there, but I'm pretty sure this is where it stems from. Yeah.
Well, it used to be in Flanders in particular, and in races in that region in particular, it was just really, really common because you'd also often have these sort of big, like cycle paths bike paths down the side, and riders would pass the entire peloton up the thing and then jump back across. And was it 4 or 5 years ago when one of the sort of like Pro Conti level riders, what was his name, that rode in the grass on the left hand side and then launched himself into the front of the
Well, that was
peloton?
last year.
Was that last year?
It was last year. It was a Bahrain victorious rider.
Was it? Was the kid's name? It was a young guy.
Yeah, what's his name?
Fran Mihaljevic. Is that his name?
No.
Yeah.
It was Philip Masijuk, was it?
That's the one. Yeah.
How do I remember that?
And
Wow,
it was that's good job,
I can't
Jonny.
remember what year it was.
I'm pretty
Well,
sure it was last year.
It was
trying to avoid-
2023 Tour of Flanders, and 4 months after that event, 3 months after that event, when the UCI decided to ban Mathieu for 30 days, in making that announcement, they reiterated and reminded all riders that it is strictly prohibited from riding off course onto sidewalks, onto footpaths, onto bicycle paths, and reminded riders that they would be sanctioned if they did that. And then fast forward just over a year later, and they've completely turned a blind eye to Van der Poel doing the exact same thing that they had reminded riders not to.
And that's because he got punished for the outcome, not the act of what he did, which is,
what always happens.
Yeah.
He was sanctioned for endangering all the riders, which is a separate regulation. But the UCI reminded.
I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing at you remembering the specific regulation.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it
Sorry.
should have been a yellow card. We're annoyed by it. Ronan's actually more annoyed that he's letting on. He's really calmed himself down, I think, for this particular pod.
I mean,
we should also point out that
exactly.
that we are biased about
a
potential outcome of this would have been disqualification, and then Tom Squinch would have been on the podium, which I think we've all agreed we would have deserved, being one of the strongest riders out there.
Yeah.
So we've got to point that out. But still, as Ronan has articulately communicated, there are rules in place, and that rules, they've got to be enforced. They've got to be consistently enforced.
Well, and I think we mentioned this when we were chatting about it yesterday in a meeting, that if the roles had been reversed,
That's my problem.
If it was Tom's on the sidewalk, Tom's is out of the race.
And then we'd have a completely different view on it all.
To that,
and then we'd be like,
point,
"What? This is ridiculous. We hate this rule."
to that point, I put up a poll on my Instagram earlier today, and I had World Tour riders message me saying, "What are you going to do when the rider's bigger than the sport?"
Yeah.
And like
Ooh.
this is why I get so hung up on it, is because I know the rules are applied differently to lesser riders
Yeah.
than they are to the superstars.
Do you guys
And I've
recall
given
the,
other examples.
do you recall the phrase? Was it butter on our heads? Was it Dutch phrase?
No, I do not recall. Please explain.
So this harkens all the way back to the battle doping era, and Rabobank in particular. And this is, I guess, why we care. We care because the extension of this, a logical extension of this, when you have riders who are quote unquote bigger than the sport, is that what that meant was that like butter on your head, it like rolls off, right? So sanctions, anti-doping stuff just rolls off your head. It's not a big deal. You're too slippery for it, is maybe, I guess, the other way to think about it. And this was something that was like a sort of relatively common phrase used back in, again, I think it was particularly among Dutch riders, and talking about Rabobank, is that Rabobank was like protected for a long time, right? That is, it's a function of the same issue of the sort of toothless governing body feeling like it can't touch the stars because the stars are what, sort of give it its power, right? And I'm not saying that like refusing to give Mathieu van der Poel a yellow card for riding on a path for 15 feet is the same as ignoring doping for 20 years. I'm just saying that it's like
that's
same.
what you said.
That is what you said.
Exactly, it's exactly the same. No, but it's an extension of the same sort of thought process, right? Like it's a much smaller, less consequential version, but it's an extension of the same thought process. And so that's why like having rules that are adhered to is kind of important, because it means that no one's above them and no one is able to just ignore them willy-nilly, right? Which, like if you're Mathieu van der Poel, you probably know that you're okay doing that at this point.
Well,
And
he's done it before and not been penalized.
exactly.
Yeah.
and the rest of the peloton isn't, and so that's a performance advantage, right? Anyway, we spent enough time talking about this.
Yeah.
No, we
I think my opinion anyway, some dude in a stripy jumper rolls up on a motorcycle, waves a yellow card in his face.
I think he should be David Lepartien himself.
I agree.
He looks like a referee already, kind of. He's got the right haircut.
He kind of waves the yellow card, and then Mathieu van der Poel has to like sort of look sad and like maybe argue with him a little bit and be like, no, I didn't do it. And then we get to.
Can I apologize on Escape Collector's behalf for Jonny's disparaging comments towards referees there? That's not. I'm sure most of the referees in the world are nowhere near like David Lepartien. So.